Welcome to the TA Disruptors podcast. I'm Robert Newry, co-founder and chief explorer at Arctic Shores, the task-based psychometric company that uncovers potential and helps companies see more in people. And in this fourth series of our podcast, we're focused on exploring, building and transforming TA in the age of AI. And in today's episode, we're going to explore the strategic impact of AI across the whole of the recruitment process. And I have a phenomenal senior leader at one of the largest global talent solution providers to give her perspectives and insights. Sam Schlimper is an industry veteran, currently managing director at Randstad Enterprise, and advising some of the biggest organisations in the world on their talent strategy. Prior to being at Randstad, Sam held senior TA roles in the financial services sector, including Barclays Bank and Standard Bank. Sam has a passion for innovation and transformation, and your expertise is bringing together people, process, data and technology. An expertise that I am sure is in high demand as AI disrupts every aspect of the way that we work. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's start with, what are your clients experiencing with the AI-enabled candidate?
I think everything and anything, Robert, and I think that's probably the space we're in, is that we've got clients who've got really sophisticated candidates who are using all kinds of AI, and then we've got clients who haven't experienced that yet, and anything in between. I think what they are looking for is some form of, what should we be thinking about and how should we be thinking about that? And even though AI has actually been with us for a very long time, with the kind of ChatGPTs of the world and generative AI coming online, more and more organizations are looking for, how do they harness that potential in the right way and get not just kind of efficiencies and effectiveness, but really what's a quality output? What should they be thinking about? How would they be thinking about it? So I think we've got clients across that entire spectrum asking questions.
Yes, and I think that's part of the challenge of where we are at the moment. You've got some people that are going, actually, is this a big issue? The candidates have now got AI in their fingertips on their phones that, you know, is way above the technology that they used to have before, and in many ways actually more sophisticated than what we have as recruiters in our hands. So, but there are others that are seeing a huge increase in volumes. There are challenges around integrity. So if you've got cases where, you know, that is something that has been a real problem.
Definitely, and we have organisations who've come up very strongly and said, this is our belief and this is why, attached to their values, their culture, their strategy. And then we have organisations who are mute, and then people don't know what to do about that. So candidates going, should I, shouldn't I? What's my expectation here? I actually had a really interesting conversation on Thursday with a person and consultant. We were talking about this. Is it that a candidate comes in and if they don't use AI, you're sort of cutting off a limb because it enhances you in a great way? Or is it that actually it's more like a tennis racket that was because what we still want to understand, and I think where most of our organizations still are, and actually most candidates still are, is I want you to see me and who I am as a human, and the organization wants to see who you are as a human and what you bring, plus how AI enhances that. But what we don't want to do is cut straight to the, what are you in an enhanced AI state?
Yes.
So I would say that in 99% of clients and in candidates, we are saying, I want to be seen. I want to be seen for my humanity, and I want to be seen how I'm using AI, because it's a skill that I have and a skill that I want to grow. But still, we want to be seen as humans and what that brings to an organization.
Yes, and I hear that a lot, that we've got to figure out, how do we enable candidates to use AI while it's still at the same time not overlaying their capabilities with something that isn't them. And so what's your advice to your clients then? Because you've got, you come from the financial services sector, and a lot of the regulatory authorities are saying we've got to deter and detect AI. AI is bad because it impacts the integrity of the process. So candidates should not be using it, and organisations should make that clear that they can't use it. So what's your take and advice?
I think my advice is clarity.
Yes.
And again, this goes back to what does your organisation stand for, and an explanation as to why. Interesting enough, the AI Act says, explainability and transparency. The same applies and actually always has with candidates. So what are you expecting of them? Why are you expecting? But where do you want them to use it? Where do you not want them to use it? And why? And what's your explanation to people? That's the advice. I don't think there's a wrong or right.
Yes.
The world will use AI though. And so our advice is also, this is going to happen.
Yes.
So therefore, let's not pretend it's not. And we don't know how fast, how slow. We don't know what reputational things will come out. And of course, our clients want to protect their reputation. I think it's really interesting when we talk to clients about the stories that you hear on AI, and probably Microsoft is the one that people still bring up around, the bias, because bias often comes out. Interesting enough, what were the learnings from that is not what we focus on. We focus on, that was the bias. Yes. But actually, if we focused on...
or Amazon.
Sorry, yes. Thank you. And thank you. And I think that's really important, is what learnings do we have from this? How do we keep that in a safe way? And how do we learn as we go without having reputational damage? We see some of our clients going the whole hog. So we've seen one of our financial services firms actually do as much automation and as much AI as they can in the entire recruitment process. And then we've seen them come back a little bit because the feedback they got, and this is really important, was actually that feels a little wrong to us. We as candidates and as people hiring want more human in the loop here. Mm-hmm. And so they almost chose the route of let's push the boundaries and then let's get the feedback as to where that feels good and where that doesn't, what the experience is and how that's affecting the outcomes. I think that's the first advice, is what does it? And the other thing is, what are you measuring?
Yes.
So how are you measuring things along the way? This is not one sort of holistic. There are measures to be put along. What is the measurement? What's the impact? How do you feel about that impact? What's the unintended consequences of an impact? What we encourage our clients to be is to be scientists. Like scientists deal with things, right? Scientists don't go into the lab and go, here we go, off you go, we're running with it. It's
evidence-based, isn't it?
It is, and it's feedback loops. It's not a once and done. And so that's, I think, where we are with AI. So we see clients taking AI in different parts of the process. We tend to see clients still being a little bit nervous about that front end matching and making decisions, of course, because there should be a human in the loop with those things. I will be a little controversial here, Robert, and say, one of the things I think this gives us a fantastic opportunity to do is think about what we're putting in at the beginning of the process. And the reason I say that is we have bias inherently in all of our processes anyway.
Yes, we always have. Yes.
And that is true. I think what people are worried about is when you put AI, then you create that in a sort of prolific way throughout your entire...
Exactly, just repeated.
And it's just repeated at scale, and it can be exponential. But what I think it gives us the fantastic opportunity to do is really think about that top of the funnel. What is it that we understand creates performance? And I don't think we've spent, your world is purely based on this, right?
Yes.
We have not spent enough time doing that. We've almost kind of gone, okay, well, if we get that kind of right, we'll sort it out as we go. This, I think, will force us ultimately in the right way to really think about, how are we thinking about potential? What does that mean?
Yes.
In a world? How does the world of work change? So I think that top end of the funnel will become highly focused, because now we're going to automate and put AI down the funnel.
Yes. Well, I like that, and I think it's an important point that you've got two big elements in what we need to think about here. Is that there's transparency, how's AI being used, and then we have to come back and think about actually the world of work is going to change, and therefore we have to think about what performance in the future is going to look like. And I will come back to that, because I think that's a really important point. But the first bit around back in the process then again, and how AI is being used, one of the things that I feel, and it'd be great to get your perspective on this too, that is one of the challenges around this, is what I talk about as the moral contract that exists between candidate and recruiter. And the moral contract used to be, I put a lot of effort in to fill in an application form, I will go through this recruitment process and whatever hoops and hurdles that you ask me to do. In return, I expect you to give proper thought and respect to whatever effort you ask me to put into.
Yeah.
So if we are going down the route of AI and automation, because we just have to, because the volume of applications, and even if we're transparent in saying to people we're using AI in the process, do you worry at all, or what's your advice to your clients about that moral contract? Because if candidates think you're using AI, then they go, well, I'll just use AI, and it's just a battle of AI versus AI now.
Sure. So I think, interesting enough, and again, I was trying to think who posted this. I think my colleague Glenn Cathy posted this. The issue has never been about the tools we use or how we use it. The issue is ethics and morality. Mm-hmm. No matter what you're doing, that still stands. And so our advice to clients is that's exactly what you have to go back to. What are your ethics and morality? What is the contract? Why is that your contract? We've said transparency. There's also explainability, right? And that would be, I was on a panel with a law firm the other day, and we're saying that's going to become even more important. Now, interesting enough, an AI can say, well, these were the steps that I took. You asked me to do this. These were the things you asked me to look at. These were how you think they were performance indicators. I took these 7 steps. So AI actually has more explainability than what sometimes we have today. So that's going to be a really interesting thing as we go. It can show you its steps if it's been set up in the right way. But it's our steps, to your point.
Yes.
We are still guiding the steps. So again, going back to, we need to be really clear about what the steps are. What is our social contract and our ethical and moral compass? One of the things that we see organizations do incredibly well, and the big organizations that we work with in the world, and I can name this because they are publicly out there. So if you think about the IBMs of the world and their CHRO Nicole, they were the first to set up a governance around AI with a people element.
Yes.
Because often it goes product first, what's happening with our customer, how are we putting that into whatever our business strategy is. But there's a people element for your employee that needs to be thought about, whether that be a current or possible employee coming in, that is then brought into that governance and ethics and moral. And there's we've seen organizations set that up well and then make decisions off the back of that as a principle, rather than a technology's come in or here's a use case. The first thing that comes in is what's the morality, what's the ethics around that, and how does that sit with us? So I think that's a great point.
It is, and it's a really important one that I think we have to kind of explore a bit more, this point about. It's one thing to have governance. It's another to say that we need to have human oversight.
Yep.
Totally in agreement with all of that. Then there is the understanding and the discipline about how we make sure that explainability is as we think it is. Because, and for me, and it'd be interesting to explore your thoughts on the difference from the EU AI Act between automation and AI.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, automation is where, to your earlier point, somebody in the organisation has set those 7 elements and criteria against which a computer algorithm has then determined a score.
Yeah.
That is very different from saying, here's a job description, putting that into an AI large language model, and it's scoring it, and then post hoc explaining how it came to that decision, but that wasn't set by a human. And is that the kind of governance that you're seeing?
It's a beautiful thing. It's where are you putting humans in the loop and for what?
Yes.
So is it your design? Is it that, to your point, that generative AI has designed something and now you're checking and validating that?
Yes.
Those two things can both be true, but you have to be really clear about that.
Yes.
I also think one of the infancy areas that we're looking at is when you think about work, and let's say recruiting is a piece of work to get done. Yeah. We don't think of it like that today. So we think about, so what the outcomes I'm trying to do, what are the tasks I'm trying to achieve, what are the skills that, and then what part of that should be automated or got AI, what part of that should be human, and what are the skills that are required to do that, and therefore which humans are best to do that. We do a lot of that with organizations around redesigning work to then make those decisions, rather than there's this new shiny object and I can use it. And I'm not saying people shouldn't experiment with those things, but before you put something in place, you want to be thoughtful about your design. You're designing a system of work, of which humans, automation and AI are all part of that. You need to be thoughtful about what you are designing in that and why. And so I think the design of work is super important. I also think it has an implication, and there's a fear around this and excitement around the skill of recruiters.
Yes.
Right?
What are they? What value and what skill are they bringing?
And you brought up an amazing word. The way we measure recruiters today, is that the value we want them to add? Or is that because there's a process that they are driving today, and that's a sort of KPI widget-based productivity set versus a value set? Those things are fundamentally going to change. And we need to be thoughtful around how we move people through that in a positive way too.
Yes, there's a couple of things to unpick around that worth exploring a little bit more. One is your point about you talk about a system of work and understanding how that system of work is going to change in an AI world. The same can be true of a system of recruitment. And I talk a lot about the golden thread that needs to be between the output, this is what performance looks like, and then we need to design back, and that kind of systems thinking around that, to the application and who we want to attract. And there has to be a golden thread all the way through.
100%.
But so often, and maybe you find this too, I find that golden thread has been sliced so many times because somebody has come along and said, oh, look, this is a lovely piece of AI technology. My new ATS provider has said, oh, I've got this new feature. We can screen CVs now, resumes for you. And they go, here, switch it on. And then suddenly a golden thread is, because how does that relate to performance? And therefore, part of the value, I think, of recruiters now is how we need, as recruiters, we need to understand that golden thread.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Okay. And I think it's interesting, right? Because there's upstream and downstream, and you have many stakeholders. That's what is really exciting about recruitment, and really complicated, because it's not that there's one element to that. There are many, but to your point, there's this golden thread. So I think one of the skills that recruiters will move into, yes, there's relationship, and yes, there's understanding and seeing people and being able to understand the nuances of people, really important, and I don't think that will go away. But it is this systems thinking.
Yes.
I and again, I don't know what your experience of this. Even before AI, I think AI is just going to heighten it, and I think it does. This is another example. We just spoke about connecting to performance. Here's another heightened. What I've seen before with recruitment processes is SLAs, where it's handed from one thing to another. It also causes the same issue, right?
Yep.
Because you are chopping between things that sometimes you can't then see this golden thread, and it also creates an inconsistent. Sometimes you need to move people faster, and sometimes they need to go slower, and that system doesn't allow for that.
Yes.
You need a dynamic system that changes based on things like supply and demand, based on what's happening now, and that dynamic system doesn't necessarily take place in some of the processes I've seen. AI will actually be able to help that dynamism and actually go, oh, this person needs to move faster because they've got something else going on, and if we don't do that, we're going to lose out here. But look, there's these 3 other people here that could, how do we work that system differently? That's going to be helped. But I don't think I haven't heard people talking about this. I've heard them more about, like you said, what can I put in here at this point in time? So I personally have a bugbear against SLAs, because I think it creates a fragmented system.
Right.
And so I think it can be helpful if we're thoughtful about its design, rather than we just plop it into a point because
somebody said, I need to improve my time to hire.
Yeah, which is probably the fastest. And time to hire is important. it's not the biggest importance, right? Quality of hire has been this elusive thing.
Yes, the most, yes.
Yes, like how do we measure this quality of how do I know? But actually we can really start moving towards that quality perspective.
Yes. And so the challenge, and it'd be interesting how you would advise, senior TA leaders to deal with this, because you've got directives coming down from senior leadership. Two directives I'm hearing all the time. One is we need to use AI, we need to be more efficient, and actually recruitment is one area where we want to experiment with. So you're getting pressure of use AI. And then equally TA teams are seeing their budgets slashed.
Yep.
I mean, in many cases, my clients have spent between 20 and 40% of their budgets have been reduced in the last couple of years. So you've got TA leaders sitting there going, well, on the one hand, my senior leadership is telling me I need to adopt AI, I've got less budget, so I'm going to have to do more with less. And then on the other hand, I have to experiment and think about how I do this without completely breaking recruitment. Yeah. So there's a tension in there between I've got to get my SLAs done, and I agree sometimes that they're counterproductive, but at the same time under huge pressure to transform and change.
Yep.
So how do they square that circle, as it were?
And I feel that I have a level of empathy because it is a circle to square, and both of those things are true, and all of that is needed.
Yes.
So that is the reality, and that is what they're being asked to do. I do think often, and again, in many organizations, there is little time spent on innovation, and I'm not actually going to call transformation because I think lots of time is spent on transformation, whether in the right place or not. Let's just park that, because I feel people, when they say the word transformation, it feels a little bit like strategic workforce planning, and everyone sort of loses the will to live because they're it's my constant transformation, and actually we've never really landed anything, I think is what often feels. So, but I do think there's innovation and experimentation, which is super important.
Yes.
How is it built into the work system? That's the question for me.
Yes.
So you have to build it in as it happens.
Yes.
And it is part of what you do as your job. It is not something that is nice to have. I feel the same about learning.
Yes.
Learning is not a nice to have. Learning new things is part of your job. If you're going to be great at any job, you have to constantly learn and unlearn. So it's not a extracurricular activity that happens between the hours of 3 or 4, or what everyone puts in on their Friday afternoon and then never gets to because they've still got all their tasks in their inbox. So I feel like this is not an extracurricular. It needs to be built into the way you work. Of course, there's what we call business as usual, which is how do I be as efficient as possible? Make sure there are no extra slush funds sitting around. I haven't come across a team anymore that's like, oh yes, I've got this thing stashed in the back for just, that's not happening. So you have to be thinking about that. How am I going to be as competitive, as productive, as commercial, whilst doing the right things?
Yes.
And I think that is a tension. And I think that's a leadership moment.
It is. And I wonder, Sam, whether we need to petition our TA leaders to go to the board table and do what the CTO and the IT have done for many years, which is, and I love your point about innovation and experimentation, because that drives learning. Yeah. But in TA, we've never gone to the board and said, okay, if I want to do all these things, I get all these strategic imperatives that you're giving me, then I have to be able to innovate and experiment, in which case I need a sum of money, because you don't object to IT doing that. IT have always had budgets for trying out new tech because they're saying that's the only way we can keep on top of the change. So why would that not be true for TA too?
That's true. And I think you often see, well, you're starting to see now, which is, at a broader level, the CHRO and the CIO role coming together in
that's right. There was Moderna, wasn't there, that has
absolutely that's done that, and we see that more and more, because the point is AI is a technology and a colleague.
Yes.
It's interesting, right? It's both of those things. It's not just a tool. It is a colleague, which is now no longer human. Yeah. Therefore, you have that crossover. So you do need to experiment. You always have, but even more so now. And 100%, why would you not get your... The other thing, I think sometimes we've over-leveraged hiring and under-leveraged mobility and learning.
Yes.
So I think we see that starting to change too, is actually the way we go about recruiting or hiring should be internal as much as it is external. Some organizations have always had that, some really haven't, right?
Yes.
And so that is, I am constantly looking at who my people are, whether they be external to my organization, whether they be non-permanent, whether they be permanent in, and that is my workforce of the future, plus its synthetic friend. How does that come together? I think that's a different skill set. I also think, Robert, what's really interesting is structurally, it often tells me a million things in an organization is where have you put recruiting?
Mm-hmm. Put it in terms of organizational structure.
In terms of organizational structure. Where is it at the table? Is it purely a shared service transaction? Is it sitting in your strategy? Is it sitting in... And that is often a question I'll ask an organization to say, and why have you housed it there? How do you think of it then? Do you think of it as a pure transaction that has to just happen? Then you won't be doing the other things, and then you're going to miss out.
Yes.
And so and because it crosses those boundaries, and I think that's what's really interesting about it too. So I'm not saying it shouldn't be in a GBS shared service, but there are parts of it that shouldn't, and it crosses over those. And so how you structurally think about how it's set up in your organization to enable it to go to the board to have the right conversation.
And I think that's going to be so interesting as we sort of go through all this change in the next couple of years, is how organisations think about that, and they think about recruitment. Because it always makes me smile that there isn't from a publicly listed company a annual report that I read that doesn't start with people are our most important asset, and then you go, okay, so and how much have you invested in recruitment, or is it a shared service that has got a shrinking budget?
Agree. And another structural, which I'm not going to solve for, but I often point out, is where does it sit on your finance? Does it sit under investment, or
yes,
it doesn't,
or just cost?
It sits under cost.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thing.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
So okay, we have to make it a bit more strategic. And how then are you advising your clients on what to invest in and what not to invest in?
It's a great question because it doesn't really have one answer.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that sounds really non-committal, but it's true. Again, one of the things that clients will often come to me and say is, okay, so what's best practice? What are others doing? And I understand why people are asking that. And I understand there's a need to know what's happening out there. Mm-hmm. So, but I feel like companies are often obsessed with what others are doing rather than what they should be doing.
Yes. Because it's all situational and contextual,
totally
and nuanced.
Contextual, aligned to your DNA of your organization and your strategy. And just because you're in an industry of financial services or other, does not mean you want to be doing what other financial services firms are doing. Yes, you might want to know, but to what end? I don't think organizations spend a great deal of time thinking about, and what do we want to be? And it tends to be, and what are others doing? Great, but what do you want to be, and why do you want to be that? Because if you focus there, that's what gives you that competitive edge.
Yes, and that of course is a good common sense around that. I think part of the challenge is, I mean, particularly when I've spoken to the legal sector and the financial services sector, you've got disruption that are going on in their sectors, in their huge amount. Just thinking financial services, the Revoluts of the world, and so if you are not keeping an eye on what's going on out there and how the newer organisations that are coming into your sector are organising themselves and structuring themselves and the processes that they're using, and you're not attuned to those, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
But they, of course, they have a completely different contextual setup. So how, if you are, how do you go about then talking to your clients about, because they worry about transformation, and in some cases you're going, oh my God, I've got just this enormous organisation here. It's like shifting a tanker.
Yeah.
and yet I've got these fast-moving vessels that are outside that everybody's telling me that I've got to be like. So how do they make that start of change without having to completely overwhelm their normal working life?
Yeah, and I think just as you said, I have yet to see, I say that with, when transformation is we're doing it all for everyone all the time.
Yes.
It's just not right. It's just not true. So I think with our organisations, it starts with, where do you want to begin and why? And taking a little bit, experimenting, innovating in that space, and testing it in that space, learning and truly learning. And again, everyone talks about, fail fast, learning's our thing. And then you see the behaviours of, but that wasn't delivered on time within budget, therefore that was...
Yes, you've got to set it up for success in the first place.
You've got to set up an entirely different way of measuring value in that situation, other than in your kind of BAU, what you're trying to deliver. But allowing that and then moving that across the organisation, that is when we see the most success.
Yes.
I think the other piece of that, and again, whether it's AI or anything else, the word change, I don't want to use the word change management because that's really super, again, it's just one of those things, but it is, you are changing the way people and systems work. If you do not spend time doing that, it doesn't matter what technology, what AI you're bringing, it will not make the difference that you want it to make.
Yes.
So therefore, having that comprehensive view of why are we doing the change, what's the root cause that's happening, where are we going to start with? And, I work with organizations that actually have very different views on this and both can work. So let me give you some examples. Where I have a financial services organization that decided they were going to look at where to put in AI, and they decided to start in finance. And the reason they did is because they believed if they could get the CFO on board.
Right, then it'll be easier for other projects as they come forward.
Because the CFO is going to go, this is actually worth investing in, and go and tell everyone about it.
Yes.
They also knew it was going to be one of the hardest places, so they were going to have to go really slowly, probably, to win the race. That was their strategy. That's what they did. That's what really worked. Have another organisation, different industry, who chose a different route that said, actually, we were going to put in AI where people put up their hand. And so they opened their sort of internal system and said, who would like to test and experiment? Who would like to be an earlier adopter? Who's got an idea? We're going to harness that and and that worked for them. Because in their organisation, culturally, that's the way things work. In the other organisation, they had a strategic intent of how they were going to move things forward. So I don't think there's a
single approach.
No,
sure.
But you've got to understand, what are you doing, and kind of go with, why have you chosen that path? What is it that you're trying to achieve with that, and then stick with that? And what are the principles that we hold on to whilst being adaptable throughout that? And that is very true that we see when people are implementing AI into their organisation. How have they chosen to go about it, and where they're doing that? So the smaller chunks definitely works.
Great advice. And let's go back now to the thing that we parked earlier in the conversation around performance.
Yes.
So we understand, about process now, and we covered that. Some really good thoughts for you on that one. But the part of why we're changing the process and what we're trying to achieve from this comes back to that fundamental first principle, quality of hire.
Yeah.
And quality of hire in the future with AI around is going to be very different from what it has done in the past. So how are you thinking about that, and how are you advising your clients on that?
So, and again, I do not have all the answers on this. Surprising. And because we are working with our clients, and often we are not working with them on what best practices, we're working with them on noodling it out, right? And this is one of those examples. Return on investment to value is a slightly different measurement. And value is a lot more nebulous to measure than return on investment, but we think is right in many cases. And so what we do with our clients is we work with them on how we're actually going to get that done in this particular circumstance. And we don't have here's the formula for how you test value versus return on investment. We don't have that. But we think it is really important because, as you say, that is going to change. So however we think about it today will change tomorrow and again. So what are you building into your organization in terms of that muscle that thinks about what value is and thinks about how you measure it and thinks about how it's tested and then changes it as that goes, rather than ROI is this. And again, I feel often TA leaders and other leaders in organizations get stuck in the process that has become quite known in organizations, which says you have a project, you go to a board or whichever, that project has to have a return on investment attached, it has to have all the details set in. What life doesn't work like that anymore, and yet we're still using that.
Yep.
And so we are working with organizations to say, again, out of that, how would you think about this? What's the hypothesis? What's the big idea? And when you think about startup firms which are driving a lot of the growth, that's what they work on. What's the hypothesis, the big idea? Let's test and learn, test and learn. I had a really interesting conversation with a startup AI firm last week, who actually, I mean, it's fascinating because literally boldly goes in and goes, so I've got a builder of talent acquisition, I've got an analyst of what happens in your data, and I've got a recruitment agent. And they are working, I've put them in organizations, everyone loves them, everyone should have them. How are you going to help me put them out there? There's no like, oh, hang on a second, is this the right or wrong thing to do? Let me ask you some questions.
I've already proven this.
The confidence level in those startups, which is amazing and terrifying all in one. So there's a bit of, well, hang on, why would firms want to do this?
Yes.
And they kind of looked at me like, why would they not? This is mad. This is the way the world's going. And so I think there's this like two-speed. Well, how would you test that?
Yes.
How would you put that into your organization in a way that feels good? And one of the things we talk to organizations about, and I realize, yes, measure, all of those things are important. What feels good and what doesn't feel good? If you are doing things that don't feel good, as a human, you should probably think about that.
Yes. Well, that's right. And a lot of the time, the poor TA teams are so inundated with just trying to get the day-to-day done that if somebody comes along with confidence and what appears to be a silver bullet for their problems, they go, hallelujah, that'll make my life easier.
Yes.
And so I think you're right. We have to think very carefully about what those return on investments, what the performance criteria are around that. Where I'd like to go also on this performance piece is, what does good look like? So the whole thing about recruitment is we want to get to this output. That's the golden thread piece. What is the output? But the output in the future is going to be different for a lawyer. It's not going to be I want somebody who can read through loads and loads of documents. AI is going to do that so much better. It's going to be the same for so many other of those entry level roles, and we're going to have to rethink a bit now. I mean, AI can create graphics, it can create videos. So what's your thinking about the output piece, and how is that changing, and how should organizations be thinking about that?
It's a great question. It's probably where we spend most of our time and work, whether it be TA or elsewhere, but let's take TA.
Yes.
If I think about the skill of a recruiter in the future, one of the scenarios very strongly could be that they spend time with the organization that they're hiring for in understanding work design.
Yes,
to your point.
Yes, it has to be really thought through and structured, that work design.
Yes, so instead of a hiring manager come and saying, Robert, I want you to go and find me a person who does this, 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 and this, because I know, because I've had 7 others like that, and that seemed to work well.
Give me the cookie cutter.
Give me the cookie cutter. I think the skill set of the recruiter might become is, right, so what are the outputs we're trying to get in this work? What are the tasks that then are associated? What could be done by AI and other? Do we have that now? No. Are we going to put that in over time? Therefore, what is it left for the humans to do? Therefore, what skills are the humans, and what potential would we need to have that sit underneath those skills? When I talk about skills, I don't just mean a list of technical skills when I say that. Therefore, how do we understand, we're going to bring a set of people together with these skills in order to work together to get those outcomes?
Yes.
That is a very different recruitment process and activity than what happens today.
It is, and quite challenging. I mean, you're going to a hiring manager and talking to them with slightly different language, And it probably feels a little bit confrontational in some ways too, of what task, and they're going, hang on, just get me another one of these. But I think you're right, it has to be a bit more of that trusted advisor.
That's exactly what it is, right? And so I think this is, again, an opportunity for talent acquisition and recruiters to change from a process person, as in just running a process, into... Because, again, if you think about what a hiring manager wants, what do they ultimately... They want to have confidence that whoever is joining their organisation is going to improve the performance and how it feels.
Yes.
If you can rely on the fact that your recruiter can tell you how to do that...
Yes.
Then they won't care if you're telling them, because that's what they're looking for.
You won't be exactly asking questions that feel challenging, but actually ultimately they are...
For all the right reasons.
For the right
exactly
reasons.
That. So I do think that's where a really strong scenario of a future will look like around that. And then it will be, what technology do we have, including AI, that would help us bring that to life? Because I think there's two different branches of AI. One is the products that we have and some of the technologies that we use, whether that be in TA or elsewhere, and it's built into that. The second is, that is how we work.
Yep.
It's not just a technology or a product, it's that we work with it on a regular basis. And again, I think we're at the early stages of how do we think about that. We talk about self-automation. So when do you hand it over to something, an AI, because it is better, and I just need to validate and be a checker in that? When do I work with it in a sort of centaur type of way, where I'm doing some pieces because that's what humans do, and it's doing some pieces, and then we are combining together.
Yes.
And then when are we cyborging, which is we are doing things together all the time? I don't think in work design, and it's one of the things we work with our clients on, people are thinking about that. So not just work tasks and skills, but how does the work actually get done, where you build in ethics, you build in morality, you build in great outcomes, where you're working together in that way? Because some things are self-automate. Yes. We were speaking about the legal. Sometimes I wouldn't want a human looking through the same documentation. I would want...
AI is going to be more efficient, more reliable.
I want the human bringing some form of nuance in their lived experiences, but I don't want that. I want that to be self-automate. But on other things, I don't. I want that to be cyborg or centaur, and I want us to be thoughtful about what that is.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so if that's where we're going on this, then that's going to create a very different emerging early careers kind of talent pipeline, because that's not how we have thought about or developed our emerging talent
100%.
Around that too.
Yeah.
So how do you think that's going to change things?
190% agree with you on that. I think that's going to change fundamentally. I think actually for even experienced hires, and we call it that, right, which is interesting because they have some sense of experience, but actually their experience isn't necessarily going to lead them to what we want them to do.
Yes.
So therefore, the ability to understand potential, what people actually bring to the party, what they are, their inherent core, and what they show up with, I think will become even more important. So I'm sure your business is fundamental in those type of things, and I think that's a changing market too, right? Which is also going to take some...
It's going to be much more focused on potential, isn't it, now?
Much more, and therefore scientific around that, right? Mm-hmm. I think for emerging talent specifically, and again, the team and I are working very strongly on this because we see numbers declining.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're already seeing that now. That is, yeah.
So if we look at overall, employment numbers, they don't look bad. But when we take out the emerging talent numbers, they actually are declining. And again, my colleague Glenn Cathy has posted about this. My colleague Francesca and I are working very strongly on what that looks like. So we see a different role emerging for emerging talent then. The word emerging seems to be coming up a lot. Yes. And that's because they are not going to be doing the same things that sadly us older generation had to go through.
Well, it was a different world of work that we were coming into.
World of work, you were doing some of the things that you were just learning stuff by rote and what have you. Actually, that is no longer going to be needed. So what is the role going to be? And we use the analogy, and again, my colleague Francesca is working strongly on this, around the beehive and you have a queen bee, you have workers, but you have scouts.
Scouts, okay. I haven't studied bees enough. That's
I know.
Lovely
there
idea.
We go. Yes, yes. So 10% of a beehive always has scouts, and those scouts are not going and finding the food where they know where it is, which the workers are. They are finding new things. They are finding new things,
just
new ways
things
of,
new food sources of food, right.
New ways of journeys, all of those good things. That is their sole purpose. Emerging talent, actually, the most neuroplastic, and again, I want to give kudos to my team. Harriet in my team, who's, I think you may have met, who's a psychologist, will tell you this is super important. They are most neuroplastic. They are set to be scouts just by their very nature at that point. They want to go and investigate.
Well, that's right. They're coming into the world of work to learn, to figure out where they play.
So they are almost predisposed to scout work. Mm-hmm. So how do we think about what scout work looks like in an entire organisation?
Yes. And we've never thought about it, but as scout work, in the past, it's just been grunt work.
That's it. So scout work can be anything. Mm. The other thing is they are in proper learning mode, right? They haven't got the deep canyons of learning that a more executive type of leader will have, which in some ways brings great things, but also brings other things because you're in your deep canyon.
Yes.
So they can actually disrupt that and help those people unlearn some of the things that are no longer relevant. And so we see two really strong roles for emerging talent, scouts and unlearning from others, and they could actually play a very different role in an organisation, one that is crucial to survival of an organisation going forward, particularly as we spoke about, where we're going to have to adapt in a much more agile way. And if you think about a system of adaptability, that can inherently be built in with emerging talent. And how exciting.
Oh, fantastic. And exactly. And I think there's a lot of worry about what the role of emerging talent is going to be, but when you describe it like that, and I love the bee analogy on that, it can be incredibly exciting and incredibly rewarding and valuable, both for the organisation and for those individuals coming in to have that type of role.
Because, we've all aspired to do grunt work, right?
Well, well, that's right, exactly. We've all, you've come out of university thinking, right, how can I use all these newfound skills of problem solving and creativity? So let's use it, as opposed to, right, here's just a stack of documents for you to look through.
I just want to pick up on that. It's interesting.
Yes.
Because I think tertiary education and institutions are going to have some interesting times.
They're going to have to change a bit too. Yes.
Yeah, I think universities being one, but there are a plethora now, therefore, of where you would create problem solving, collaboration, creativity.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily come from a university degree.
No, that's right. You've got T levels. You've got further education colleges.
Whatever it is. You can open that up, which is again
apprenticeships. I absolutely agree. Yeah. Final question on just thinking about emerging talent and looking at potential. I know that neurodiversity is really important to you. You've worked with the brilliant Kate Griggs from Dyslexic Thinking, and that there's a lot of change that's come about in the last few years about what different thinking styles, different brain structures can bring to the world of work.
Yeah.
How do you see AI impacting that? Do you see it as leveling the playing field? Do you think access to AI may actually hinder things? What's your take?
Again, I think it's how we think about it, but to be honest, and if you speak to Kate, and again my colleague Matt and Kate have done so much work on Dyslexic U and us from a workplace perspective, if you think about dyslexics as an example, all of their skills, if you partner with them, AI just takes them to completely next level. So the things that AI is great at are not necessarily the things that dyslexics are good at, but the things that AI is good at are dyslexics can just knock the ball up the park. That is true of, and again, I'm going to steal a word, Dart Lindsley, who does Humans for Work, he uses neurodistinct rather than neurodivergent, and I really like that.
That's nice to have come across that.
Yes, exactly. I think it's a Dartism. So I think that, again, we can think about AI, which completely takes away barriers that have been artificially put in the past for neurodistinct people.
Yes.
It is very close to my heart, as I have my family are full of neurodistinctions. But again, I think, and we've worked actually, and again, I can talk about this openly. Laura Powell from HSBC has been amazing in working with Kate and thinking about the process of hiring and removing barriers fundamentally to bring in neurodistinct people into their organisation, and has done some incredible work. It takes leadership to go, how are we going to make this work? The other thing which is really important on this is if you do it for neurodistinct individuals, it just makes it better for everyone.
For everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's not like you have to have 17 paths, which one's for dyslexic and one's for autistic and one's... That's not true.
Yes.
If you just remove the barriers for everyone has a better experience. So it's literally like, why would you not do this? But it's taking the time and energy from a leadership perspective to do that. But again, with AI, I think we're going to be almost forced in a lovely way, because it's going to remove those barriers.
It is.
So the playing field, to your point, will become, well, it's AI versus AI. Well, then what's the differentiator? And that's where our humanity comes in its beautiful, squiggly craziness.
It does. And I think on that positive note is where, we want to and need to look at what AI is going to bring to us, because with all change, disruptive change, there is an element of fear, but there's an element of opportunity. Yeah. And you've shared with us today a lot of really good reasons why we should be looking more at the opportunity rather than the fear, but we should never keep our eye off the dangers of it. But it's been fascinating talking to you, Sam. Lots of really great advice, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.